Hi, welcome to Midwest Magic Cleaning. My name is a series of slow farting sounds. Please don't make fun of it. It comes straight from the Bible. Today we're starting a brand new series where we're going into someone's house that is utterly destroyed from lots of different things. Mice infestations, roaches, extremely large holes in drywall. There was a fire in here at one point and it soot stained all of the ceilings and walls pitch black. We'll get into all that here shortly. But we're going to clean this place and then fix it up, paint some walls, give them some curtains, and turn this place back into a home that they can be proud of, or at the very least comfortably live in. Now this episode, which is episode 1, isn't going to be like this magical transformation that you normally see on my videos. There is a transformation that's pretty extreme, but this is just step 1 of a multi-step process to get this house back into order. And the very first step that we're taking is removing massive old mouse nests. This is a house that this couple is purchasing off of their parents, and there was problems with the house to begin with. When they took it over, it had major hoarding problems, and that's where the mice and the roaches came from. They've since eradicated those, so there's no more infestations in the house. However, the aftermath of that is pretty bad. The wife has been working on the house pretty much nonstop for months or even a couple years to get it back into this condition. Now, the upside to this is that there wasn't anything that I would consider to be dirty. All the counters and appliances were really clean. The floors were clean. The house is just in extreme disrepair, and there are some parts of it that she just hit a wall once she tried to dive into them. This pantry is one of those. It was so bad that nobody's really accessed it for quite a while, long enough that there were canned goods that had expired in 2019, 2020. So it's been a few years since people have been in this pantry. Because of that, mice went crazy in here. They built one of the biggest nests I've ever seen, and there was so much mouse poop that I filled a 5-gallon shop vac about halfway full of just poop. So if anybody needs some extra mouse poop, I've got it. So the first thing that I had to do was get rid of all the old junk, expired food. Everything that was metal in this pantry was rusted, so there's a humidity problem or a water leak or something. So pretty much everything that was stored in here had to go. I mean, on top of the rust, it was completely covered with mouse waste. And then once I got rid of all that stuff, it would expose the shelves and the floor so that I can start cleaning up the old nests and then getting this pantry sanitized so that it could be used again. While you're watching me do that, I can tell you a little bit more about this backstory. On top of all the old hoarding stuff that they had cleaned up, they also had some roommates that were less than ideal. Those people have since gone from the house, and it left the owners to just kind of pick up the pieces after they left. That's kind of what Jason and I are doing here. You won't see much of Jason in this because he actually got pretty sick for a few days. So this first episode will just be me, but you'll see Jason in further episodes. If you don't know who Jason is, well, that's none of your damn business. Stop trying to pry into my personal life, Chad. Anyway, on top of all that, they had a fire in the kitchen that fortunately didn't destroy any walls or anything, but there was a lot of soot. They got stuck to the ceiling and the walls, and it just made the whole ceiling pitch black. We're going to fix that for them too. This has just been years of a couple living with this house that is so overwhelming you don't even know how to fix some of the stuff that's broken. Fortunately, I'm a huge nerd who tries to learn how to fix those things, and because you guys watch these videos, that's how I can afford to go in and give people help for free. Speaking of which, if you haven't followed my Facebook yet, I've got a link in the description. We've monetized Facebook and Reels, and so the more people we have following over there, the better. It's just another way that you can support the channel. And if you don't, well, you can go straight to heck, son. Straight to heck. I apologize for my profanity. I'm getting worked up. Anyway, back to this house. The mouse nests were so bad that it clogged up my vacuum, so I had to just put on gloves and scoop up the mouse nest by hand until I got rid of all the big stuff. Then I could use the vacuum, the shop vac, to vacuum up all the poop and finer particles of the mouse nest. I ended up vacuuming this place 6 times. Most of that was with a shop vac. Then I used a regular vacuum to help kind of comb up the carpet to make it fluff up a little bit, and then went right back to the shop vac again. Then once I got all that done, I could go back to the shelving, and I sanitized that with straight alcohol. It was 70% isopropyl alcohol. That's the strength that you need in order to kill germs and bacteria. If you use 90+%, it doesn't mean it sanitizes more. You need a certain water content with the alcohol so that the germs can absorb it and so it doesn't evaporate too quickly. People often ask why I don't use bleach. You absolutely could use bleach, but I'm actually allergic to bleach. But either one will work. They both do the same thing to germs. They nuke them. They nuke them right in the face, right exactly in their face holes. Suck it, germs! Once I finished the pantry, I moved to the lower cabinets. Now, I didn't have to clean out all the cabinets. Most of those were actually really good, but the ones on the lower section had old mouse nests and a little bit of black mold. If you're ever dealing with black mold, one of the best things to use is hydrogen peroxide and or alcohol. I usually give it a 1-2-3 punch. Bleach kind of works on mold, but only at the surface. It's not really great at getting down to like the root of the mold. I can start by using bleach as long as I'm wearing gloves and I don't inhale it. Then I can go over it with hydrogen peroxide, and then I finish it with 70% isopropyl alcohol. Make sure you're wearing gloves. Make sure you're wearing a mask. The best mask to wear outside of a respirator is an N95 mask. I didn't happen to have any of those, so I was just careful. But you can just wipe it down. Use a scrub brush if you have to. Just make sure you don't disturb it so much that it puts mold spores into the air. Otherwise, if you inhale that, it can turn you into a mold person. And though that sounds good, the superpowers you get with that kind of suck. I mean, you just kind of sit there and grow slowly. I don't even consider that much of a superpower at all. While cleaning below the sink, I took care of that black mold, and then I also cleaned off all of their old cleaning products. So the below this sink hasn't been accessed in a long time either. So those old bottles had some gunk on it that just needed cleaned, and I just did that with straight alcohol as well. But one thing I do once I'm done with all the wiping or mold punching is spray the entire thing down with 70% alcohol and then leave it. It's not going to damage a cabinet that's in this condition already, and it will evaporate off fairly quickly, but it's just kind of an extra final middle finger to the mold that was there. And it ensures that if I missed anything or didn't let the alcohol set long enough to do its job, now I know that it's going to, because I'm just going to spray that on there and not even wipe it off. I'm just going to let it dry on its own. After the sink area, there's two more cabinets that are perpendicular to each other, and they also had several massive mouse nests. These cabinets haven't been used in ages for that exact reason, so we were able to throw away almost everything that existed in these cabinets. I took out everything that was in there. I think we saved one pan. Everything else went in the trash. Then I could sweep out the old mouse nest, use the shop vac to get any small piles of turds, and then punch that with alcohol the same way that we did the sink. If you're doing this to your own cabinets, you can saturate the unholy crap out of this because the cabinets are already not useful as is. So if you saturate it too much and it warps them, who cares? The alternative is replacing the cabinets in their entirety, and that happens to be the most expensive thing to do in a kitchen remodel. We don't have that kind of money, so we are into sanitizing rather than replacing. By saturating it and just overspraying everything, it gives the chemicals enough time to work into the wood itself so that we know we're not just doing a surface sanitization. What I tend to do on these is saturate it once, wait until it dries, saturate it again, and then just repeat that process 5 or 6 times. The alcohol or the bleach, whatever you're using, will penetrate just as far as the mouse urine did. And even so, I still suggest that they don't store any open food in these cabinets. Just store extra stuff like light bulbs, stuff that you're not going to eat. I mean, I eat light bulbs, but I'm weird. But if they wanted, they could continue this process of saturation with bleach or alcohol, and over time, it doesn't even take that much time to do. These will be safe to put whatever you want in there. Food, tools, the 1996 Chicago Bulls, pretty much anything. Now, you may be wondering why they couldn't have done this themselves, and I can kind of explain it like this. Have you ever spilt something like spaghetti or coffee, something that really stains, onto a carpet, and as the food or the drink hits the carpet, all you can do is just kind of stare at it mortified, like, oh my God, I cannot believe that just happened, and you can't make yourself do anything other than stare for a few seconds? Logically, you know you should just get up and get a towel and break out the cleaning stuff and get it taken care of before it sets in and stains, right? When you're living in a condition like this, there are some people who get locked into that freeze up frame of mind where they open up those cabinets and they look and they're just mortified and they're like, I have no clue what to do here. Logically, they know they can clean it up, they can just do what I'm doing, but their brain won't break free of that overwhelmed, mortified feeling. So the door gets closed and they just don't use that anymore. It has nothing to do with laziness. This woman actually cleans her house. She does a very good job at it. This is all stuff that was left over from that utterly destroyed hoarder aftermath, and she just can't get past that. Everything else she's done fine with. I totally get that. Sometimes it takes an outside eye, someone like me who's got a weird hobby of doing this, to come in and just say, oh yeah, that's easy. Let me just knock that out real quick. And the appreciation that she showed after I got all this out of here and made that usable again actually made my stress lift. But when we get done with this house and get all the things fixed and have it all painted, it's going to look like a completely different place. It's going to be pretty awesome. Once I was done with the cabinets, I didn't have much time left in my day to do much more, but I wanted to get some of this wallpaper off because we're going to be painting this whole thing. Now, I'm pretty sure that the wallpaper in this kitchen was original to the kitchen. So maybe 1920s through 1950s, somewhere in there. And I didn't realize it until I was about halfway through, but the material on the back side looked to me like it could have been asbestos. Once I realized that, I stopped peeling it and realized that the remaining wallpaper I could paint over because somebody had already painted over it anyway way back in the day. But you can see the remnants of that fire that happened. And that soot that's on the ceiling, it looks like it's painted black. That's actually just smoke damage. That extends into the living room, and we're going to do those ceilings as well. I'm also going to repair the holes around that breaker box. That's just a simple matter of drywall patching. But again, before I do all that, I need to get this wallpaper off of here. When we come back here for episode 2, I'll be repairing a whole bunch of this stuff using not just the drywall patches, but filling in cracks with drywall mud. We're going to be weather stripping some doors and caulking along some windows and doors that are allowing like a ton of air through. And then I need to figure out a way to reinforce the house itself so that if Jason and I break out into a breakdance battle, we don't accidentally collapse the kitchen. It's really all about prep. Anyway, we'll be back next week with episode 2. If you're not aware, we have a members only section, which gives you guys access to Discord. The second tier, I do an extra video every week, sometimes a live. And then there's a third tier I won't even talk about because it's dark. In order to go to that tier, you've got to have something wrong with you, man. And if you haven't already, give us a follow on Facebook because we're just building that channel up now, mainly because I've had so many people steal my content on Facebook that we're in the process of wiping those people out and getting them banned and copyright striked and all that. But in order to make that stick, I have to build up my own Facebook. So anyway, that's linked in the description. Members, I will see you on Wednesday. Everybody else, I'll see you next weekend with episode 2. And stick around because this is going to be a pretty crazy transformation by the time we're done. Later. Hi, welcome to Midwest Magic Cleaning. My name is Acid Wash Bell Bottoms, harbinger of your worst jeans nightmare. This is episode 2 of us saving a destroyed home. This house was the remnant of a hoarder. It had been through a fire and has many, many broken pieces, holes in walls, destroyed floors, and just a slew of problems. A slew, I say. An amount of problems that can only be quantified as a slew. Now, normally you see me cleaning up extreme messes like hoarder houses. However, the woman who lives here is actually a very good cleaner. There wasn't a lot of cleaning we actually had to do, except for in the first episode where we had to remove several large mouse nests, some things that she was just too overwhelmed to get to, and I honestly can't blame her, it was pretty bad. But outside of those, the whole house is actually kept in really good condition. So in today's episode, we're going to go a step further than just getting her house back in order. We're going to fix a whole bunch of stuff and completely transform her kitchen. It seriously is kind of mind-blowing when you see these before and after pictures. But first, I want to start on this front door because there are some problems here that are actually functional. There's about a 3/4 of an inch gap between the door and the frame, and it's not something that can be fixed by just manipulating the hinges like you'd normally do. The door is many, many decades old. It's shrunken over time from heat and cold. The house is settled to the point that unless we completely rebuilt the frame, it's just kind of trashed. So we're going to do a cheap fix on this until the door can be replaced. I'm going to triple weather strip this. I put 2 1/4-inch black rubber weather strips on the inside of the frame on the top and the side, and then I'm going to follow that up with putting a 1/4-inch soft weather strip along the door itself. That'll make the door airtight and kill the breeze that was coming through it before. As you can see, it was covered in duct tape to keep that breeze at bay, but we're going to get rid of all that duct tape and do the weather strip thing. But we're going to go a step further because the glass is actually not seated well well in the door, and the only way to get it out is to take it apart. And this door is so old that if we take apart the framing that holds in the windows, we're not going to get it back together again. So I'm going to silicone that glass from the outside. The door's not used anyway, so rather than have globs of silicone that can be visible from inside the house, we're going to do it from the outside. So suck it. Also, the locks are way out of place and they don't quite work, so I'm going to put a sliding lock on the upper right hand corner just to hold it closed for the time being. We don't have a lot of money to work with here, so we're going to work with what we have and spend as little money as humanly possible. The whole point of this series is to kind of show how we can transform a place on as little money as possible. Now, because you guys watch the channel, that gives me YouTube ad income, and I'm going to reinvest that income into materials to get this house back into shape. So for instance, we're going to buy them curtains, curtain rods. We spent about $500 on paint. We're getting them a little bit more storage, and then we're going to fix some massive holes in drywall, especially in the kitchen. When you see those holes, it's kind of mind-blowing. But what we're not going to do is some HGTV thing where people are like, let's spruce up our kitchen. Our budget is $85,000. The hell out of here with your $85,000 kitchen. We're going to fix this up in a way that any person can, with elbow grease and spin kicks, baby. I don't know why I did the thing, but you just got right in your face. Right exactly in your face hole. Now, while I'm working on the door, Jason's in the kitchen wiping down the walls and the ceiling because even though they'd cleaned that before, like after they originally had the fire in the kitchen, we still need to get off as much dirt and grime as possible so that whenever we put the primer and the paint on, it actually sticks. Once he's done with that, we're going to cut some pieces of drywall. Now, fortunately, we didn't have to buy any drywall. The husband actually had a small collection of drywall sheets, so we just jacked one of those and cut some patches out of that. Patches are pretty easy to do, though I kind of suck at it. You just want to cut the patch itself slightly smaller than the hole. Now, I slightly have this particular clip out of order, and I'm too lazy to change it, but the way you determine that hole is you actually cut the existing hole into a square. So you're actually making the hole in the drywall bigger. Then you just screw the patch into place, put some drywall mud over it, put some tape over that, and then mud it all together. Now, you'll see me doing this, and I'm not going to get super specific on how to do it because I'm terrible at it. My apologies to all drywall people for the horrible job you'll see me doing. So if you want to learn how to do these, they're actually super easy to do. I would just look up a video on YouTube that specifically shows you how to do this. Other people can explain it way, way better than me, and definitely demonstrate it way better than me. One thing you'll also notice while I'm doing this is that door frame is so shot and in such bad condition. I'm going to rebuild that in another video. I really wanted to do it for this video so that everything was perfect, or as perfect as I could get it. But I drive a Camaro and I couldn't fit 7-foot long boards in there. I need 2 7-foot ones and then one that's like 4 feet long. But yes, I will be building a new frame for that. They're super easy to do as well. But you can see that on a further episode because we're going to do a lot with this house. If you're ever doing this, especially if you know you're going to paint, while you have the drywall mud out, fill in all your nail and screw holes. If there are any cracks around the room, fill that. It's one of those things where since you already have the materials out, you might as well do all those jobs at the same time. For instance, in this kitchen, there was a moose with a big dent in the side, so I just drywall mudded the moose dent. It didn't make the kitchen look any better, but the moose was appreciative. He was like, "Thank you for putting on the drywall spackling on my moose body." "You're welcome, moose. Now I must go frolic in the forest." Whee! Bye, talking moose. Bye, drywall guy. Once we have all the drywall mud on, we're going to leave that overnight. You don't necessarily have to leave it for a full 24 hours, but you do need it to be there for a couple of hours to let it completely dry all the way through. Then you're just going to sand that level. You don't sand it level with the wall. You just sand out all the high spots and try to even out the low spots to try to make it appear like one big flat wall. I highly recommend you get a shop vac with a good filter in it. That way you can hold the shop vac hose in one hand and sand with the other and not get drywall dust all over your kitchen. Sanding is by far the worst part of drywall patching, so anything that you can do to not make yourself look like a powdered donut is a good thing. Now, while you're watching me do this, let me plug a couple places that you can follow us on. Aside from here on YouTube, one of the more important places is Facebook. We had a ton of people stealing our videos, and so I finally just gave in and started up the Facebook page, and we recently got to where we can monetize that. So between here on YouTube and on Facebook, that's how we can afford to do some of these turnarounds and makeovers on houses and fixes and things like that. We also have a merchandise shop that's got a whole bunch of ridiculous clothing and coffee mugs and all the stuff you'd expect a merch shop to have. Live barking wolves, barking, snapping, biting wolves. You can buy a box of those with like MMC shaved into their wolf fur. And then we also have a members only section. There are 3 tiers to that. There's like a $1.99 tier that's just for people who want to support the channel and help us out with what we do. There's a $4.99 section that gets an extra video every week. Then there's a top tier that I won't even mention because it's insane, and everyone who's a member of that is also insane. In a good way, I suppose. But all of those things are linked in the description of this video. And that's all I have to say about that, son. Now, one thing to keep in mind as we're fixing and transforming this place, we are in no way attempting to make this perfect, nor do we claim that we're an expert on anything that we're doing here. We're just a couple guys who like to help people who need it and typically can't afford it. We do all this stuff for free, and our goal is just to make this house livable again, as well as something that they can be proud of. So anytime we're painting, we're using the owner's chosen colors. We're matching the decorations that we buy to their style, and we try to keep in mind above everything functionality. So for instance, if they need more storage, we're going to buy decorations or furniture that gives them more storage. If they love coffee and they've got a broken coffee maker, we'll get them a new one. If their professional wrestling ring has a broken rope, we will re-rope those and then promptly stone cold stunner them. Because that's how we roll, son. And now it's time for the first coat of primer. Get ready, baby, because here it comes. I am a primer master. They call me Optimus Primer. And I'm like, primer? I barely knew her. Hi-oh! Anyway, we're using Kills Primer, and the reason we're using it is because we have so much staining and soot and 100-year-old wallpaper paste. We need a primer that not only bonds well to the surface, but we need one that fights stains, and Kills is the best at doing that. Normally, on just a normal everyday paint job, if we had to prime it, we'd only need 1 coat of this. But this room is so bad we're going to use 2, and we could have even gone as far as using 3, but 2 ended up working. We primed the entire room, ceiling and all, twice, and then we put 2 coats of paint on it, and it turned out pretty good. You'll see in the before and after pictures here in just a bit. So be patient, man. I don't put up with non-patience, with unpatience. I'm not putting up with it. Now you'll notice on some parts of this wall there's still a little bit of wallpaper left. If you watched episode 1, you saw me taking some of this off, but about halfway through it I realized that I likely was dealing with asbestos, so I stopped peeling it. I did get off any remaining wallpaper that was too loose to work with, but anything that was nice and adhered to the wall I ended up leaving on. I'm not equipped for asbestos removal or lead removal or anything like that, so our best option, once I found out what I was dealing with, was to leave it alone and paint over the top of it. But by the time I figured that out, most of the wallpaper was gone anyway, so it wasn't that big of a deal. And I was all like, asbestos, more like as worstus. Please don't call me as worstus. I'm just some lonely wallpaper. Shut up, talking wallpaper. Okay. One thing you'll want to keep an eye on is the ceiling. We put one coat of Kills on this, and it looked dramatically different, like shockingly different. I was really surprised at how well it covered up soot stains. When we painted the second coat on it, it looked so good we were considering just leaving it. We're like, man, that looks so good, we don't even know if we want to put ceiling paint on it. Then when we put ceiling paint on it, it turned yet another shade of white. So every time you see us go over this ceiling, you'll be amazed at how much whiter it gets every time. Like by the third coat, it's so white, its last name was Cumberbatch. The hardest part of this paint job was the paneling, and it always is, because they've got these little fake black strips in them that's supposed to represent like space between wood planks, and they're really hard to paint. The trick for me is if you can get primer on those somewhat thick but not runny, it will create a surface for paint to adhere to, so you don't need to put in as much effort. So in other words, the first time you put it on, you're going to do a little bit of work to get the primer to stick to it, but after that, the paint will stick to the primer really easy, and you can pretty much get away with just a roller. But the first time you put it on, you pretty much almost have to have a brush to get in there, or a really thick napped roller. Paneling is also notoriously slick, and so you can either sand it with a really rough piece of sandpaper like 100 grit, 150 grit, and then paint primer on it, or you can get an adhering bonding primer, which will prevent you from having to do that step. That's what we did. The Kills that we have is a bonding primer, and you just put a thin layer of that on to begin with. That way it can dry really quickly, and the second coat of primer that you put on will stick not to the paneling, but to the previous coat of primer that you put on it. After that second coat, then it's pretty easy. Paint just sticks to the primer and you're good to go. But painting the first round of paneling just kind of sucks. If you ever peel wallpaper off and you have a material that's on the wall like this one where it's stained old glue, if you're not able to clean that off, then you're going to want to let your primer set overnight after you put that first coat on. Because what happens is any old glue or old soft material is going to absorb the primer like a sponge, and it's going to swell. But if it sits overnight, that gives it time for all the moisture to evaporate off, and it'll create a nice hard surface for you to put your second coat of primer on. Painting is like 80% preparation and 20% painting. In a perfect world, we would have taken all this drywall down and re-drywalled it and removed the paneling and given them a new floor. But again, like I said in the beginning, this is not like a $30,000, $50,000 remodel. And I'm not a skilled enough drywaller to do work like that. I can do patchwork, but I'm not about to tear out an entire kitchen, mainly because this is a cleaning channel and not rebuild entire kitchens channel. Though admittedly, I will give it to you that there's very little cleaning in this video, but there's even less kitchen building. I actually get that a lot. People will be like, man, I would have just gutted that place and started from scratch. And I'm like, awesome. Money's not imaginary. So we'll just patch and paint. Though if you'd like to tear out and rebuild their kitchen, you are always welcome to come with me on these. I'll give you their PayPal information and we'll just go straight up full hog on this sucker. Man, is that ceiling not nuts? Look at that. That's all soot stains, and Kills is just going over that like it was nothing. We said a lot of phrases that started with the word holy while priming that ceiling. And again, every time we put another layer on, it just blew our minds. Once we had the kitchen completely primered, we left for the night to let that all cure overnight. Now, normally you can leave a primer until it's dry and then add an extra hour to that in order for it to cure, maybe a couple hours at the most. Sometimes you can even get away with just letting it dry and not curing, and it's fine. But we wanted this to cure overnight because the material underneath it was so destroyed and stained. We wanted to make sure that that primer formed a shell over that. Now, fortunately, the second coat of primer or the second coat of paint always goes way faster than the original first coat. I'm going to speed it up to make it look even faster than that, but second coats always go quick. This was a day where we finally had cell signal, so I could do a live for the people in the top tier of the member section. It's called Team Filth. But that second coat day was really awesome because not only did it go fast, but it just felt relaxing because we didn't have to be as tedious on our edging. We didn't have to worry about putting on a gigantic amount of primer, because your first coat you got to put a lot on typically. The second coat you just slap on. So we just spent the day primering out this room and shooting the breeze with Team Filth. It was really nice because we didn't have to worry about any sanding. All the drywall was already patched. My horrible mud job was covered up with primer, and there was no moose in the kitchen at all on that day. There was nary a single moose. The kitchen was virtually mooseless. It was a veritable smorgasbord of non-moose. Hey, while I've got you guys here, could you do me two small favors? One is to hit the subscribe button because we're actually working our way toward 1 million subscribers, and that's when we get our gold plaque. And really, that's all I want out of YouTube. I just want the gold plaque just so I can shove it in my kids' faces and make them all jealous. Because if you can't make your kids cry by making them jealous of awards, are you even a parent? The second thing is, if any of you watch Post 10, it's a great channel. It's like the most wholesome thing ever. I've been watching his channel since he was making aquarium videos. And for any of you who are fans of his, you know that's a very, very long time. I'm like really old school into Post 10. If you could drop by one of his videos and just tell him that Midwest Magic Cleaning said hi, he'll have no idea what you're talking about because he doesn't know me, but I want him to. Anyway, I don't fanboy over hardly anyone, but I'd love to meet Post 10 one day. Him and Al Blades. I really want to meet Al Blades. And also Juggernaut, if you're watching this, hello, shout out to Lawn Care Juggernaut. He actually actually stopped by and congratulated me when I got my silver plaque, and I thought that was really cool. I'm pretty positive that if I ever get a chance and I get the time, I could probably do an inside-outside collaboration with him. I just need to free up the time and contact him and see what he thinks. And I also wanted to take a quick moment to thank today's sponsor, which is no one, because I don't do sponsorships. If you ever see me doing a sponsorship, it means two things. One, I've tried their product and I genuinely like it. And two, they've paid me a buttload of money, like a ridiculous, embarrassing amount of money. Joking aside, I actually don't do sponsors for a reason. I don't want them to have their hands in our business, like yours and my business. If I make a weird joke that comes off wrong, or if I say something they don't like, then in my eyes, they have the right to come in and say, look, this makes us look bad. We need you to edit out this section. And I don't want a company being able to have that sort of power or pull in any of our content. So every single thing that you see me use on the channel, I use because I personally like it and they work. And I don't want to be put in a position where like Jim Bob's Butt Cream has me start using their products on the channel because they're paying me to use Jim Bob's Butt Cream. And everybody knows I make homemade butt cream out of 2 parts butt and 1 part cream. That recipe's on me for free. You are welcome. So day 1, we did repairs and drywall patches and all that. Day 2 was primer. Day 3 was second coat primer. On the 4th day, we were finally ready to paint. Now, fortunately, with paint, you don't have to let that cure overnight. You just need it to dry, and then you can put on your second coat. So we did all the painting in one day. She told me she wanted some kind of classical grays and whites, just nice neutrals that were classy. So I found a gray called Chromed. It's a Dutch boy paint, and Chromed is the name of the gray. It's slightly on the blue side, just slightly, but they also consider it a true neutral. And then I just got a classic eggshell white for the upper walls. Now, I know some people think that's boring, but the way you handle that is you use your decorations to break up those colors. So people aren't looking at the walls, they're looking at your decorations. In a previous video, we did really bold colors because that's what the owner wanted. She had two-tone green in the kitchen and two-tone orange in the living room, and then two-tone green in the bedroom again. And this one, we're kind of going the opposite direction, but just like I said in that previous video, that the colors are always perfect if they're what the owner wants. I don't like it whenever people try to follow some HGTV fad. I don't like it whenever they try to paint according to what they think their friends and family will like. I like it whenever they pick out things that they personally enjoy, because they're the ones who live with it. They're the ones who will get the direct mood change that comes from freshening up a room or repainting a room. Now, what this particular gray did for this room was it set kind of a color palette. Because it tended to lean toward the blue side, the cool side, it matched well with the wood of her cabinets. And she's also got kind of a pastel bluish green set of tiles above her sink. And normally that would be kind of a mishmash of colors that you wouldn't really think of. But strangely, we based that all on a clock that she liked. She had a really cool looking just round clock that had blues and earth tones in it, and she really loves the clock. So since she loved that, we matched the rest of the room to that. And that's what I'd suggest that you do if you're ever redesigning a room. If you have a picture you love or a couch you love, some feature of a room that you're really into, it's totally okay to build the room out around that thing. That to me is what gives a room personality. For instance, my office is based around all the bodies of all the Draculas I've slayed. I see a Dracula, I slay it, I bring it home to my office, and then I build the decor of my office around that trophy. So my office says this is a place to work, and also I'm not putting up with Draculas. You come in my office, you don't be a Dracula. And people know that just from my decor. Now, we did the first and second coats of the trim first, and one of the reasons we did that was a matter of room. All of our stuff that we used to paint the room was in the center, so we were in a position where we needed to do 2 coats of trim just so we can get all the material out of the way so we could have room to walk. Then after that dried, we can do the rolling, let it dry, then second coat roll, then finish off the ceiling, and we were all done. Also, it's still driving me nuts every time I see that door frame, so I totally get it if it's driving you nuts too. Again, it will be fixed. We'll build a new one. We'll paint it up to match the kitchen. It'll be fly. It'll be funky, fresh, dope fly. You just got to be patient, man. It's only episode 2. Be patient. Now, if the channel ever gets big, like Ari Katarina big or Detail Geek big, Al Blades big, I'm setting a long-term goal to hire some contractors to come in and help me so that I can focus on the cleaning part. Like, let's say we go into a hoarder's place and the floors are destroyed and the walls are all moldy and they've got leaks and broken sinks and whatnot. I can do my thing with the extreme cleanups like you're used to. Then I can bring in a dedicated contractor to help me replace floors and walls and sinks and all the things they need to get their home back into not just livable condition, but really nice condition. Because let's face it, a lot of the TV shows that focus on hoarding kind of fixate on the drama. And I get it. I know how TV shows work. I know how that operates. But we're not TV and we don't answer to ad people. So we can just make our own program where we go in and help people. And that's the whole point of the show. We don't have to show anybody having a breakdown. We don't have to follow their journey. We don't have to go on a roller coaster ride of emotions as we clean up a house. We just show up, clean it, fix it, show the pretty aftermath, give the homeowners a really nice surprise, and then we all go our separate ways knowing that we helped people. That may or may not be obtainable, but you always have to have goals, and I think that's one of my bigger goals, is to walk into a pit of despair and just obliterate it with hope. Oh, one big thing while I've got your ears. Because the channel's grown so big so fast, there's a lot of people who don't know where I'm from. I'm from South Central Illinois. I get probably 50 requests per week for me to come to another state and help people out. I will be able to do that at some point in the future, but I'm nowhere near ready to do that just yet. Right now, I do this all locally. Almost all of the houses that I've helped so far in this channel have been within like a 30-mile radius of me. So I really apologize. I can't go to like Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, or even as far as like Chicago. That's way far away from me. But at some point I will. Just subscribe to the channel, and at some point I'll put out an announcement and say, hey, we're finally able to travel. I'll be in Michigan or wherever for the next 2 weeks, and I'll give people the town location and all that, and then I'll set up traveling and helping people across the country. That's kind of the ultimate goal. But for right now, I'm really sorry, but I can't go to another state. Even if you paid my travel and food and all that stuff, it's not a matter of money, it's a matter of time. And right now I have very little time. Another question I get a lot is someone will explain how their family is in a hoarding situation and how do they tackle the mess. So they ask me for advice, and my advice basically boils down to take it 3 feet at a time. Don't clean the kitchen, clean a 3-foot section and counter. Don't clean the bathroom, clean the bathtub. Just one little thing at a time until the whole room's done. Just take it 3 feet at a time. The reason I'm saying it here is because I get asked a lot, dozens of times a week. Between here, Facebook, and TikTok, we have about 1 million followers, and so my DMs are constantly filled with people asking questions like that, which is totally fine. I just don't have time to answer them all. I basically go about 100 hours a week. That's not an exaggeration, between cleaning and fixing houses and producing the videos and narrating, and then I spend at least 2 hours a day flexing in my bathroom mirror, just admiring, just flexing and saying to myself, look at all that huge. How do you even live with all that huge? I just do, me. I just do. My wife absolutely hates it. All right, we're now closing in on the end of day 4, and this is the last of the painting. Once we get this second coat of paint on and the ceiling paint, we leave for the day, let that dry overnight, and then the next day we come back, and that's when we do the decorations and all the wrap-up work. I love doing second coats because they're so fast, and it's such a dramatic improvement over the first coat. If you've ever painted and you've wondered why it just looks kind of crappy and shoddy, there's a pretty good chance that you just put one coat on it and looked at it and was like, that's good enough, it looks fine. Then when it dried, you could start to see the see-through spots. And the reason I assume that with a lot of bad paint jobs is because that's the way I used to be. I wouldn't think that a second coat would make that much of a difference, but it makes a dramatic difference. So if you're ever painting, do the second coat. You may be worn out, the idea may be sucky, and you may be thinking the last thing I want to do is repeat the paint job that I just did. But after you get the second coat on, it makes such a huge difference that you'll be glad that you did. The first big piece of furniture I got her it's basically like a bookshelf. It's just a regular everyday shelf that stands about 6-ish feet tall, give or take. The shelves are removable and they're adjustable. And I got it for 2 reasons. 1, I wanted to give her more storage, but 2, I wanted to put something in front of that breaker box. I tried to get a nice big canvas piece of artwork to put over it, but it needed to be at least 24 inches tall. And in order to center it on that wall, it would have needed to be 36 to 40 inches wide. The only place I had to shop at was Walmart because, again, we live in a small area and there's not much around except Walmart. And the one I went to had 0 pictures. Most of the ones I go to in other towns have a section where they've got like little canvas prints and stuff, but this one didn't. So instead, I got the piece of furniture. We used that to store all the stuff that she had been storing on top of her fridge, and it happened to fit right in front of that breaker box. Not enough to fully hide it, but enough to make a difference. Then, as it turned out, that clock that I mentioned earlier that she liked so much, her toddler pulled the hands off of it. And fortunately, at that Walmart was the exact same clock. They had one. So we went ahead and got that and replaced her broken clock. Because that would have been pretty unfortunate if our whole idea was to base the kitchen colors and decor around that clock and then find out we can't use it or we have to hang it up on the wall and it just doesn't tell time. It lost the one piece of functionality that it was meant to do. So yeah, we got super lucky with that. The second thing I got her was a 5-foot by 7-foot area rug to cover up that really bashed in floor. And then I found another runner type of rug that was the same exact design that I could put in front of her stove and washer and dryer. Again, if one day I'm able to hire contractors, flooring is a big thing that I want to be able to include in these makeovers. But right now, the only thing we can do with it is just cover it with an area rug. But it works. I also found some gray curtains that pretty much matched the gray that was on the wall. And then I found a sort of teal curtain that matched her clock that I put on the front door. Then we found a set of 3 mirrors, decorative mirrors that were white and 3 that were black. So I just hung those up in a random pattern just to fill space on one wall, and it actually looked pretty cute and kind of artsy. But that's it for the kitchen. We're going to go back there this coming week to do the living room, and then there's a spare bedroom that we want to knock out real quick, and then a main bedroom. So there will definitely be an episode 3, possibly a 4, and possibly a 5. So we're not done with this house yet. So stay tuned. There will be more coming from this home because the ceilings from the living room were almost as bad as the ones in the kitchen. So just painting the ceiling in the living room would be worth it even if that's all we did. But it's not, so shut up. Anyway, thanks for watching. Members, I'll see you on Wednesday. Everybody else, I'll see you next weekend. Later. Hi, welcome to Midwest Magic Cleaning. My name is Smooth, and this is episode 3 of fixing a house that's been through a lot. It's been through hoarders, a house fire, there are holes in the wall. The kitchen in the living room was just utterly stained with soot. The wallpaper in the kitchen was made out of asbestos. There are sheets hanging where curtains should be. The front door was just duct taped shut at one point. And I live in a very rural, repressed area of the country, so fixes like these are difficult for people because one, not a lot of people have this skill set, and two, for a lot of people, this is just unaffordable. You're talking about families that live not just check to check, but dollar to dollar. So even a $20 gallon of ceiling paint is out of the question for a lot of people. Fortunately, because everybody subscribed to the channel and it got so big, we're able to take the money that YouTube brings in and invest in my community. At some point, we'll be going across the country to help people out, but right now I'm focused on homes that are in my area that I can reasonably get to. And I can tell you that over the course of these last 3 videos, you all have made it possible for us to invest about $3,000 into this house. Again, for total strangers. So thank you so much just for being there and watching the videos. And if you haven't subscribed yet, every one of those subscribe clicks helps out the channel quite a bit. Now this house has 2 expensive items in it. One is this massive entertainment center. It's like 10 feet wide and almost 7 feet tall. And it's one of those that has a kind of a floating shelf on top, so you can move the side cabinets toward or away from each other in order to kind of customize the hole cutout where the TV would go. And it is extremely heavy. The second thing is a massive TV. It's like 75 to 78 inches. Now, the first reaction from most people would be like, well, if they can't afford to do blah, 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 then why do they have this giant TV? Well, one, it's none of your business. In my area, most people get a lot of their furniture, especially their electronics, around tax time. They get a tax return, they take a certain amount of money to get a new TV or a computer or whatever. And at places like Walmart, those gigantic TVs are so cheap nowadays that if you're going to be spending a few $100s on just a normal everyday TV, it actually doesn't cost that much more to just get the giant version of it. The problem is that this living room is not really meant for a TV that size, and that cabinet plus the TV together are going over the top of a window, which makes it just look like a dungeon in here. I'm actually glad I didn't bring lighting with me because it gives you an idea of how dark and depressing this living room was before we started it. Now, the TV itself is sitting on a dresser because it's so big that there's not really a stand around that it can fit on without the legs sliding off the edge. So we ended up buying them a brand new TV stand, which you'll see a little bit later in this video. But it presented us with a problem. I didn't want that TV over the top of that window because this desperately needs some light. After kind of mulling over that situation for a bit, the owner pointed out that that gigantic entertainment center happened to be the same exact size of an archway that went into a little storage room. So if we were to take the end cases and put them wall to wall, the top of that would fit right over that archway and it would look like built-in bookshelves or built-in cabinetry. Then we could just put the new TV stand and the TV on the opposite wall, and the little love seat that they've got right in front of the window that allows them to watch TV, move that gigantic case, and still allow light into the room. So we took all the stuff off of that case. Now, I could have just picked that up and moved it myself because I'm so gigantic and huge. Hulking is what a lot of people refer to me, Stephen Hulking. But I didn't want to embarrass Jason, so I let him help me move that. And in the process, we had to deal with a whole bunch of wiring. They had one wire that was ran through a wall that was hardwired to their router. Then there was an old somewhere between the 1920s and 1950s, like a hanging lamp sort of deal. We had to figure out where all the wiring in the house was going to go after we moved it. Otherwise, we could have like a conundrum. I don't put up with conundrums, but we would have had to have if we didn't check where every wire went. So there was a little bit of planning in moving the case, not just because we're taking up new space with it, but because that's like their central hub for all of their internet and Wi-Fi and all that. Plus, once we moved it, we had to make sure they still had room to keep all their pet moose and their pet yaks. You wanted those to be able to stay in their own area and just not roam freely throughout the house, like frolicking throughout your kitchen, yakking it up, doing yak stuff all over your floors. But we made it work, and as we move stuff, we're cleaning as we go because this room is so small. You can't really take everything out of it, then clean it, then put everything back because there's no room to put the stuff that you're moving. everything. So this was a case where, since we know we're moving that giant entertainment center, it would be move part of it, clean the area behind it, move the second section, clean the area behind that, then put the top on, then move the couch, clean the area around it. It's a slow, tedious process. Now, fortunately for us, the wife in this family is extremely clean. She cleans all the time. The stuff that you're seeing us do in this video is more mechanical fixing type of stuff and painting. We're covering up stains, whereas she's really good about cleaning the actual dirt off. So the floors are always vacuumed. Everything's always wiped down. That's so rare on this channel. If you've been around the channel for a while, you know that we normally deal with houses that are extremely dirty, like so dirty that some people can't even watch the videos. But she always had the house nice and tidied up when we got there. If we left a mess whenever we went home for the night, the next day we would come in and it would be spotless. That makes me really proud, and I know that they'll keep this way because she's so involved in making sure she's doing the best with what she has. Now, one thing that did drive me crazy is there's plastic around the edge of their TV that has never been pulled off, and it's because I believe the husband has OCD and he can't quite bring himself to remove that plastic off of there. It's just one of his personal quirks. The quirk doesn't drive me crazy, the plastic does. So I told the wife, I said, before I leave, there's every chance I may just pull that plastic off and you can just blame it on me. And she said, no, it's fine. If you want to pull that off, it's fine. She's like, he probably won't even notice. But I laugh about that. But if somebody does have genuine OCD or they've got extreme anxiety or ADHD, you can't just go in and do the thing that they don't want you to do, because you can exacerbate their anxiety really badly. The plastic isn't hurting anything. There is no need for me to pull that stuff off. It would make me just a huge douchebag and would give him anxiety for no reason whatsoever. So I just left it on there. Now, the reason I assign that as an OCD trait is because I found several pieces of electronics in the house that all had the plastic still on it. And when I brought it up to the wife, she had mentioned that that was kind of a quirk. I'm also pretty sure that he has at least low-level hoarding disorder. He has trouble getting rid of things, and he has a lot of trouble with change. But the wife keeps him in check. She makes sure everything's clean. She'll let him keep stuff within reason. And the fact that he's willing to negotiate on those sorts of things is a really good sign for him mentally. Now, I explained this in the other video, but if you're wondering where all the holes in the wall came from, they had some roommates that were, let's say, undesirable. They've gotten rid of the roommates, thankfully, but while those roommates were there, they did quite a bit of destroying. A large hole in the living room was put there by a bigger guy who had fallen through the wall, like tripped and fell through the wall. Like he made a hole with his butt. He made a literal butthole. In one of the first pictures you saw at the beginning of this video, there's a giant hole with teeth marks around it, like it had been chewed. That was a dog that chewed through the wall. A lot of the people who lived there worked at night, so the windows have blackout curtains. One set of windows in a spare bedroom basically has a blanket stapled to the windows, and then it's plasticed over the top of that to make a complete blackout. We're going to be getting rid of that. But that's also one of the areas where that compromise is really important, because the husband is always gone at work. He works very, very long hours. As far as I understand from speaking to the wife, he's the one who doesn't like light pouring into the house, even in like the living room or the kitchen. However, since she's there 100% of the time, she's the one who has to deal with that depression factory. That lack of light coming into the house can just be a factory for depression. So one of the best things that we can do for her is to get some curtains that at least allow some light into the house, while still respecting the fact that he works late and needs things like blackout curtains or the windows sealed up or something in the bedroom to make it really, really dark so he can get his sleep. So I never go into a house and think this is the way we're going to do it because that's what I want. It's not my house. I have to take their decorations and their style into account. I have to take their interests into account. I take into account functionality and how they exist and how they operate as humans from day to day. I have them pick out their own colors, their own style, and then I build my plan around that. The way I see it is my job is not to make this into something that I could live in. It's to make it something that they can live in. Because if it was something that I liked, it would be the whole place would be covered in skulls. And like I would put paint on my butt and put butt prints all over the walls. You know those signs that people put in their kitchens that just say eat? I'd put one of those in the bathroom and only the bathroom. I would also make a sign that said live, laugh, die. So yeah, it's way better that I have their input rather than me just going in there and going hog wild. So this is the TV stand that we got them, and I have one of these myself. It fits an 80-inch TV like to the millimeter, and it's got a built-in space heater that makes a fake like holographic fire. Then it's got two glass shelves. Technically it's got four, but you can really only use two of them if you're putting like a PlayStation or something in one side. But it'll shine LEDs through the glass long ways, which makes the glass light up and the edges of the glass glow almost like a lightsaber. And you can change the colors of the flames and the LEDs and all that. It's just super cool, and it's a nice, neat feature instead of putting their TV on a dresser. If you're wondering where I got that, if you're interested in finding one for yourself, I found mine at Menards. If you don't know what Menards is, it means you don't live in the Midwest. Though you can go to menards.com, I think, and track them down. I think they deliver, but I don't know. That's where I found mine, so suck it. But that TV looks so much better on that than it did sandwiched in between that gigantic entertainment center. And by moving that entertainment center over to the archway, and by putting the TV on the new TV stand, it made their living room look literally twice as big, because the living room itself is really long, but it's also really narrow. So now with the TV pushed against the opposite wall and the couch in front of the window and the bookshelf by the archway, we took care of that squeezed together problem. And with a TV that big, you want as much space between you and that TV as possible. Otherwise, you can't even enjoy that gigantic thing. That's what she said. I'm so sorry. She did not say that. She did. She did say. So I've got like an inch back here. What your mom said. Okay.
Throwing out zingers, man.
That's perfect. If this thing was any smaller,
Yeah.
this would not fit.
That's bananas.
Once we had those things taken care of, we wanted to patch up the drywall holes because I wanted the drywall mud to be able to set overnight. The way I fixed the first hole is not the way you'd typically fix these. This one was sitting in a really weird area where part of it was on studs, part of it wasn't, part of it was floating, part of it could be anchored. And then we had a weird cut of drywall that we were using as a patch that wasn't quite long enough to patch the hole all in one shot. So we had to use two pieces. So the way we're doing this patch is not the way I'd suggest you do it yourself. We're going to cut this out roughly square shaped or rectangle shape, and then we're going to measure the patch to fit in there. I'll show you the way you're supposed to do it here in just a minute when we patch the other room. This also gave me an excuse to buy some tools that I've been wanting to buy for a long time. One is an all-purpose tool. It's like an oscillating saw, or not an all-purpose tool. It does not work with all purposes. It's a multi-tool. But the most important part of that's the oscillating saw, because it's almost like a spatula and it vibrates back and forth so that you can cut right up against door frames and then right up against floors and ceilings. It makes doing patchwork like this way easier. And I finally got myself an impact drill or a hammer drill, because in all my old videos, if you see me using a drill or a screw gun, it's always got a cord hanging out the bottom of it. And you might also notice that it sucks. So I specifically looked for a drill that doesn't suck. I got a suckless drill, a drill that's virtually devoid of suck. But yeah, I won't go into big detail about how to drywall patch this, because I'll do that in the other room. But we're just going to cut that hole out, measure the drywall to fit in there, slap it in, screw it in, put on some tape and drywall mud, let it dry, and then sand it down. So that's basically all the steps to do it, even though I just said that I wasn't going to give you the steps. But don't follow those steps, because I'll show you the easier way to do it here in a second. Okay, so here's the way you're supposed to do these to make it super easy. First, we're going to measure the size of this hole in roughly a square shape. So we're going to measure out from the furthest point of the hole and then maybe add an inch or something like that to it, so that if we were to cut that out in a square, that's the dimensions we're going to look for. We're then going to go over to the drywall and cut out a square that's roughly that size. The biggest part here is we want that square to be slightly bigger than the hole that we're going to be patching. By using this method, we're not going to have to get exact measurements, because what we'll do is we'll take that big old piece of patch, we'll bring it over to the hole, lay that right over the top of the hole, and then we'll take a marker and just outline the patch itself. Then we can take our multi-tool or a box knife and we can cut along that outline. And if we do that right, the new patch will fit perfectly into the place that we just cut out. So we're purposely making the hole bigger in order to accommodate the patch. But we're using the patch patch in order to dictate the exact shape and size that we need to cut that hole. And after that, it's just a case of putting it in, screwing it to the wall, and then doing your tape and mud job. I won't show that full process in this video because this is a room that we'll be working on next week. I just wanted to get these patches up because they were tired of looking at those holes, and I don't blame them. Also, if you're wondering why we didn't insulate that, there's two reasons. One, the only insulation I could find came in a 32-foot roll, and I drive a Camaro and there was no room to put that in there. And two, I brought some spray foam to put in there as at least some makeshift insulation, and I just flat out forgot to put it in. I did that with all three holes that we patched. I patched them up, and then Jason was like, oh, by the way, you were supposed to put that spray foam in there. And I was like, well, I guess it's too late now. But as far as I could tell, the insulation only was removed where the holes existed. There was insulation above it and below the holes because I had to actually situate that to get the patches in correctly. So they do have insulation, but just not where the holes are. Once we wrapped that up, we went home for the night and allowed the drywall mud to completely dry. The next day, we came back and started sanding, and the one sucky part about this was I have a palm sander, and I just completely spaced bringing it with me. And we're so far away from a store way out in the boondocks that we couldn't just run back and get a palm sander. It's way too far to drive. Remember, this is country. So if you're like, well, why didn't you go to a nearby store? It's like, what nearby store? There's houses and corn, and that's it. And now that we're into January, the corn doesn't even exist. So that meant we had to sand by hand, bam-ba-lam, and the only way to get through this is to grit your teeth and power through it. So I had Jason sand until his arm got tired, then I sanded for a bit until my arm got tired, and we went back and forth until all the high spots and all the divots were gone. All we're trying to do is make this smooth, but we're not trying to make it perfect because we don't know what the hell we're doing. We're not drywall people. We just wanted it to look look a lot better than it did before we got there. And literally anything could have looked better than that giant hole in the wall. So we sanded and sanded and sanded. And then after we were done with that, we wiped down the wall with just a dry rag. And then Jason used a shop vac to get all the dust up, because we're getting ready to paint this here shortly. And if the wall's covered with gypsum dust, the primer or the paint's never going to stick to it. It'd be like trying to paint a powdered donut. It's not happening. It's not happening, Bill. Once we were done with all the sanding, thank God, we had to pull off as much of the old wallpaper as possible. And this is the only time I've ever done some work in which I was glad that the people who originally did it sucked at it. Because I think this was just peel and stick wallpaper. I don't think they used wallpaper paste. And it was really, really old. It was no longer adhered to the wall. So for the most part, we could just pull a lot of this off in gigantic sheets. But we really needed to do that because since it wasn't adhered very well, it wouldn't make sense to put paint over the top of it. And whatever paint they used on it last looks to be oil-based to me, or some sort of really slick paint. So I don't think our paint would have stuck to it very well. It would be much better to just go back down to bare drywall, prime that, and then paint it from scratch. Now, we couldn't get all of the wallpaper off. The stuff that was really adhered really well, we just left and painted over. Again, we're not trying to get this perfect. We're trying to take what we have and make the best out of it. And I'm not about to spend a full day taking off every single last scrap of wallpaper. If we were renovating a house to sell, or we're trying to make some perfect HGTV looking deal, then we'd do something like that. But here, the time is as valuable as the materials that we're buying to fix this place up. In most cases, the time is considerably more valuable. While I have you here, if you like what we're doing and you would like to support the channel in more of a way than just subscribing, and subscribing is the number one thing you can do to support us. We have a members section where I give an extra video every Wednesday for the mid-tier. The bottom tier gets you access to Discord where you can hang out and BS with us all. And then there's a top tier that's just for people who want to support the channel in a more major way. That tier, when I can, I do a live stream of me doing these places in real time for just them. I can't always pull that off, but the people who are on that tier aren't there because they want the perks. They're there because they want to support the channel. It's a ridiculous price. Please don't go in there and do that unless you have the money to do it. And in fact, I don't want people becoming a member at all if they can't afford it. That's not what this channel is about. Jason and I are doing fine financially. If we weren't, we wouldn't be doing stuff like this. If you like really stupid t-shirts and mugs and this normal merch stuff that you find on every YouTube channel, we do have merch. All that stuff is linked in the descriptions of all my videos. The member section, the merch shop, my real Facebook page, all that stuff is linked in the description. Yes, there are several fake Facebook pages out there, and I've got people working on getting those taken down. The real one is linked here on YouTube. Or is it? Yes, it actually is. But if you don't have the money to do all that, just subscribe. That's the best thing you can do. It's totally free. And we're approaching 500,000 subscribers as of this video. I think we're only less than 80,000 away from that. And at 1 million subscribers, we get a gold plaque, which is the one thing that I personally want out of the channel. It's my one greedy wish that I want is the gold plaque. That way I can walk up to perfect strangers and I'll be wearing the plaque around my neck off a necklace like Flavor Flav's clock. And then I'll see like strangers at the store and I'll be like, hey, when you polish your gold plaque from YouTube, what do you, oh wait, I'm sorry. I just realized you don't have a gold plaque from YouTube. I'll go find somebody who has one and then ask them that question. And then I'll turn to myself and I'll say, hey, me, when I polish my gold plaque from YouTube, what's the best polish? Because I'm the only one in my town who has one, son. And if they don't like that, they can go straight to heck. Once we get all the wallpaper off, we're finally ready to start priming. And the upside to priming a room like this is that we're doing everything, the walls and the ceiling. So when we're trimming, that trim only exists so that we can get places that the roller can't get to. But that also means that we can just slop that stuff on because we don't have to worry about accidentally getting it on something that's not supposed to have primer on it because everything's getting primer. The downside is that we're painting into bare drywall that has old drywall glue on it or old wallpaper glue, and that stuff just sucks in paint and primer like a sponge. So we have to use a lot of primer on that and on the ceiling because the ceiling is that old school 1970s foam looking stuff. And it may even be older than that. I mean, there's a chance that could be from the 20s, 30s, 40s, and there's every chance that could be asbestos as well, which is another reason we want to coat that heavy in primer and give it a really good coat of sealing paint to sort of just seal that stuff away, because there's no way they've got the money to take that ceiling out and replace it. And as long as it's not being disturbed or cut, it should be perfectly safe to live with. Like they don't want to be eating chunks of the ceiling. That would be bad. But just having the ceiling exist, that's fine. The first coat of this primer always takes forever. It takes a ton of paint. It takes a ton of effort. But once you have that first coat in place, you let that dry and cure, and it forms a shell like an M&M candy shell. That way the second coat of primer that you put on just glides right across it. And in a situation like this, we do want 2 coats of primer. In a newer makeover, you can get away with 1 coat of primer, no big deal. But this one, you definitely want 2, and we could have even gone with 3 and it wouldn't have been overkill. So we're going to speed through this because this is kind of boring and just watching people put paint on. But strangely, whenever you speed it up, it has the opposite effect. It looks cool. Also, you're seeing a lot of Jason in this video because I'm actually using this house to teach him a lot of new skills. There are a lot of things in his own house that are similar, maybe not this extreme, but they need to be fixed. And by doing this with me and with me teaching him how to do these new skills, he should be able to take that knowledge to his own home and improve it. I think a lot of people see a hole in drywall and then think, well, I guess that's just there now because there's no way I can afford to have somebody come over and patch that. But I don't think a lot of people know how easy it is to actually do yourself, and really how inexpensive it can be depending on how big the hole is. Or they may look at the ceiling and the walls and think, God, it's so dingy in here, I wish I could afford to have this painted. But they don't realize that like 1 gallon of paint in most circumstances can paint a whole room and then some. Jason also happens to be one of those people who learns better hands-on than he does by instruction. So I may tell him how to do this, but it's not really going to sink in until I tell him and then show him and then have him do. So I will say, here's how to cut in a line of paint without getting it on the ceiling. Then I'll show him how I do it. Then I'll actually put the brush in his hand and have him do it himself. Then as he gets better and better at it, he can graduate to more complex jobs. Like, okay, you've learned how to cut in along the ceiling without getting paint on the ceiling. Now we're going to teach you how to put mascara on this ostrich. You don't want people doing that right off the bat as their first job. But once you see they have a steady hand, then they can graduate to that. Pretty ostriches don't just happen. It takes practice and a confident hand to pull that off. Now, for those of you who are wondering, we have one more room to do after this one that won't appear in this video. So we will have one more episode in this series before we move to the next series. At some point, I would like to come back to this house and do some flooring. I'd like to refloor their kitchen, which desperately needs it. You can even see that in the backgrounds of some of these shots. It's just super old tile that served its purpose, and now it's all broken up and ready to be yanked and refloored. But before I do that, I want to use my own house as a guinea pig to make sure that I'm not going to go in there and make it look stupid. Because I have at least one floor that I need to put vinyl planking on. And if I mess that up in my own house, who cares? It's my house. But I don't want to go into somebody else's house and do just a half-ass job on it. When I do a house, I want to go whole ass. I want to go ass whole on a project. Don't get mad because I made that joke. We're all adults. Grow up. I regret nothing. But yeah, we're going back this week to do that last spare room. The spare room is being converted into a kid's room. So we've already patched the holes in there, but we're wanting to paint it, fix some more wall stuff, put some nice kid stuff in there. Then all the spare paint that we have left over, we're going to leave at that house. That way they can do their own bedroom. And in case they have to touch things up, they'll have the correct colors there and the correct brand so everything matches. Then at some point in the near future, I'm going to be working on my own house for a couple of videos. I have purposely let my garage go straight to hell for the last, year. It started to get like a giant collection of boxes, then a bunch of old furniture that we couldn't really take to the dump. So I told my wife, just start throwing everything out there. I'll make a video out of it at some point. So it looks like a hoarder nightmare in my garage. It's piled up like 8 feet tall, maybe even bigger. There's exactly enough room to get my car inside and no more room. So I'm going to rent a dumpster, get rid of all that stuff on a video. I've got a bunch of stuff in my backyard that needs cleaned up. Then after that, we have at least one more person who's going to get the treatment that we're giving these current people. They live in a trailer, and I know there's a whole bunch of stuff that needs fixed and upgraded and painted. Probably get them some new furniture as well. But that'll be its own standalone series, just like this one is. One thing I'd like you to pay attention to is the ceiling, because holy crap, this was another case where as we're putting on the primer, we're thinking, how can it get any better than that? That is such a dramatic difference just with primer that we couldn't imagine it getting any whiter than it was currently getting just from the primer itself. Then when we put the actual ceiling paint on, it got twice that white. That by itself changes the mood of an entire room because the lights now have something to reflect off of. In its previous state, it was covered in soot, and that black is absorbing the light, preventing it from bouncing around the room. Once we got the primer and the ceiling paint on, that gives the light something to bounce off of, and the mood in the room changes so dramatically you can feel it. Areas that were previously like dungeon-esque and dark suddenly had light that could reach it, and it made the room feel way bigger and a whole lot less depressing. When the wife came into this room, she stopped and covered her mouth and went, "Oh my God." She called us miracle workers, which I thought was really cool. Though I think I'd rather be called a miracle flinger, because I fling miracles. Yo, man, is that old miracle flinging Johnny? I don't know. Let's ask for a miracle and see how he delivers it. I bet he flings it. And I would fling it. Fling a miracle right in your face, son. All up in your face zone. Now, one thing you'll notice is that we moved that giant entertainment center around that archway, and then we did not paint behind it, and that was by design. Once we moved that out of the way, that was so heavy that it ended up straining my back and Jason's shoulder, so we painted around that sucker. If they ever want to move that again, one, they would be crazy. That thing should never be moved ever again by anyone for any reason. But even if they did, since they're going to have the paint there whenever we leave, they can just move that and then paint. It's like a 4-foot by 6-foot section that would need to be just quickly rolled. I was also going to paint the window frames gray because the paneling in this room is going to be painted gray. All the rest of the walls are going to be painted eggshell white. And if I would have painted the framework of the doors and the windows gray and even the baseboards, it would have given it a lot more character. But they have enough in this room that all that's going to be covered up. Curtains are going to completely cover this window. All the baseboards will be covered up by some form or another of furniture and bookshelves and whatnot. So it would have been a lot of work for results that you'd basically not even see. If they didn't need that storage room back there, in a perfect world, I would have put the TV in that entertainment center and just blocked that off. And instead of the dresser to house the TV, I would have just used the new TV stand that we bought them. But the room behind it is actually being used, so we couldn't really do that. But that would have been the perfect way to solve the room issue, because then we could have just put the love seat in the middle of the living room long ways, and you could just adjust the distance between the love seat and the TV in any way you saw fit. But as it sat, everything had to be kind of smushed together in that little section, and they're just kind of forced to deal with how narrow the room is. There was literally no other way to do it. I mean, besides like mounting the TV directly to the ceiling facing downwards, and then they could only watch it if they laid on their backs in the middle of the floor. That would have given them more room that way, but nobody ever likes my ideas of TV ceiling mounting. After the ceiling was primed, it was a waiting game. We just had to wait for it to dry because I wanted this room entirely done on that day, which is a Saturday. I did not want to have to come back on a Sunday. I wanted to be able to get the video done and edited so that I can take a couple of days off and relax. But that meant that after the primer was on, we just had to wait for it to dry so that we could come back and start putting paint on. So while that was drying, I took a sheet off of the storage room that had just been stapled to the wall, and I got him a nice curtain rod and a nice set of curtains and hung those up in its place. That at least made the archway look more theatrical, and it covered up the things that they were storing in that room. A surprisingly large part of our budget went into curtains. I think all in all, we bought somewhere between 7 and 10 sets of curtains. And even at Walmart, those things aren't cheap. We also got higher end curtain rods too, because I hate when somebody gets a decent set of curtains and then has this flimsy little floppy curtain rod that bows in the middle whenever you get too much weight on it. So I splurged on the curtain rods and got really nice metal ones that had little marble balls on the ends of them. I said balls. That was pretty cool. Then I got sturdy hooks that pushed them out quite a ways to where I could put the hooks on the walls themselves instead of the window frame, then hang 84-inch curtains closer to the ceiling so they covered more area. It just makes your windows look way bigger to do it that way. And it's the same with that archway. I wanted it to cover the entire archway and make it look sort of like a stage curtain, except more decorative. After the curtains were up, it was just time to start trimming out with actual paint. And that's a pretty quick job because we're putting paint on primer instead of just the wall. The walls tend to absorb paint, so it takes a whole lot more of it in order to get your coats on. But primer just lets you glide that sucker on there. Again, we're painting the paneled wall gray and all the other walls white. Since we already have 2 coats of primer on the wall and the primer itself is white, it means we could get away with painting 1 coat of eggshell white on the rest of the walls, 1 coat of ceiling white on the ceiling, and then 2 coats of gray on the paneled wall. Normally, if I'd have time, I'd do 2 coats of ceiling white and 2 coats of eggshell white, but on this particular room, it didn't make much difference. Plus, I was exhausted and I just wanted to go home, man. One of the worst parts of painting, to me, is waiting for it to dry. So if we're doing this in stages, it's okay to do, say, a coat of paint one day, then go home, come back the next day, do another. If I was painting my house, I don't mind doing that because I live there and I can just wake up the next day and continue where I left off. But when you're making videos like this, I'm driving 35 miles there and 35 miles back every day. Every single day I'm driving 70 miles to do this house. So I want to get as much done as humanly possible while I'm there in order to make the trip worth it. Or I should say, to get as much value out of the trip as possible. So when you're doing that in a place like this and you get 1 coat of paint on, or you're getting the first coat of primer on and you're having to wait to do the second coat, a lot of times if you run out of things to do, like hanging curtains or whatever, the only thing you can do is just sit there and wait. And when you're waiting for paint to dry, it feels like it takes 5 times longer compared to if you had something else to do in between those coats. Of course, the obvious hard part is that if you're doing a whole room front to finish in one day, it's not just a tedious activity, which is one of the reasons people hate painting, but it also makes you really sore. I don't have to use painting sticks that screw into your roller because I'm 6'4", and most places I can just paint without a stick. But the drawback to that is, yes, you gain speed while doing it, but it also exhausts you because your arms are constantly above your head and you're constantly going up and down and going from kneeling to standing, and you're doing that for hours on end. I've worked a lot of physical jobs in my life, and strangely, painting is up there in probably the top 5 of the most exhausting jobs that I've done. And I've been a roofer, I've worked factories and warehouses, I've been a lawn worker and pack mule, but painting just wears me out. But there's one thing that I tried to instill in Jason, which I think he finally understood in this job, which is there are certain jobs that are so exhausting and you just want them to end, and all day all you can think about is, I want this to be done because I hate doing this thing. But whenever you're done and you do a good job on it and you look back and see the final finished product, that positive feeling that you get from that blows away all the negative feelings that you had while doing it. The exhaustion was totally worth it when I pulled out my phone to do the after pictures. It was so dramatic of a change that it felt to me like we took pictures of the house before we started, and then it felt like we finished, then went to another house to take the after pictures. It was that big of a change. And the appreciation that this family showed when we got done with it is so worth it to me. They were living in this dungeon, dark, depressing, soot-covered room that needed desperate repairs. And by the time we got done with it, it looked like your average, everyday, just family home. The white looked so good. The grays looked so good together. And all that soot stain was completely removed just from a coat of primer and one coat of ceiling paint. It made them really happy, which makes me really happy. Again, we'll have one more episode of this next week. We're going to go back and finish out that one room. Thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. If you've already subscribed, please continue to be subscribed. And if subscribing is against your religion, find another religion. Members, I'll see you all this Wednesday. Everybody else, I'll see you next weekend. Later. Hi, welcome to Midwest Magic Cleaning. My name is Itty Bitty Fluffalo, and today we're on the final episode of a 5-part series where we went into a house that was really destroyed. Holes in the walls, they'd had a fire, there was lots of mouse nests in the kitchen, or at least the kitchen pantry. Just all kinds of problems. It hadn't been painted in many decades. There was asbestos in the kitchen wallpaper, soot stains everywhere, just tons of problems. So we came in and fixed a whole bunch of stuff, painted for them. The final tally on what we spent on this house, and remember these are complete strangers, was about $3,000. We're able to do that just from people watching the videos. We make enough of an income off of YouTube to be able to go into people's houses who are in dire situations and they don't know how to fix it themselves or they can't afford it, and then we just go crazy in there. So thank you sincerely, because if you guys didn't watch these videos, we wouldn't be able to do this. Now in the last video, we patched the 2 big drywall holes. So in this one, we're just going to sand those and get all the high and low spots off of them. But first we need to pull everything out away from the walls and remove all the nails and screws. It's important to note that this room needed a lot more than what we actually did to it. For instance, drywall on the bed side of the room needed to be completely replaced. Whoever did it last didn't do a great job. I mean, it's up there, but it's not done right. We don't have the time or resources to completely strip that wall and re-drywall it. There are also holes that we didn't realize were there. Real small ones, like I'd say nickel-sized holes. And then of course the holes that were left whenever we take out the screws and nails. We didn't have time for drywall patch mud stuff to dry. But we happened to go to Hobby Lobby and they had a whole bunch of Marvel and Spider-Man posters. And this is a room for the toddler to sleep in, and then the mom sleeps in there too occasionally. And she's a big Spider-Man fan, as is he. So we just bought out one of everything in their Marvel section. And then we're going to use those to cover up holes and imperfections in the walls. So suck it. There were also 2 tiny shelves on the walls that I don't know how they got them in there, but they are in there for good. The screws are stripped out, so I couldn't get a bite on those to get the screws off of the shelves. And I know that there are hacks for that, like you can put a rubber band or something plastic into the end of the screw, and then the screwdriver will catch and actually take it out. But as I was getting ready to do one of those hacks, she looked in and said, I'm actually fine with those shelves just staying there. So we left them and kind of worked around them. So we took off everything else that could be taken off, and then we started sanding. And by we, I mean Jason. I had him doing a lot of grunt work in this video. For those of you who keep up with the channel, you know we've been through a lot this past few weeks. My wife had a parathyroid removal. She had a tumor on it that was causing very, very high calcium, like dangerous levels of calcium. So she had a surgery, and we've just been going 100 miles per hour. So even doing one of these videos was way out of bounds for me. But I figured we had just this one room left to do, so we might as well go over and do it. And it also gives me a chance to teach Jason, who's my oldest son, some skills that he didn't have before. And the way I figure it, the more of these he learns, the better help he can be to me. And he can also apply those skills to his own home, which really needs some repairs itself. So you're going to be seeing a lot of Jason in this video. I apologize in advance because he's such a piece of crap. I mean, great guy. He's a great guy, and you'll love seeing him on video. I want to take a quick opportunity to welcome in new viewers. I can always tell whenever I've been mentioned on a larger channel because the number of people I have to ban goes way, way up because the people coming in don't know the way our community operates. So I'm going to give you just a quick heads up on what we're about. I go into the homes of people who are dealing with some major issues. We're talking severe ADHD, hoarding disorder, major depression. In a lot of these cases, there's extreme poverty. They're getting help from no one. And so that's one of the reasons that we come in, because we'd like to offer help. I grew up in those conditions. I know what it's like. And to have somebody just offer help and then do the thing that needs to be done is a lifesaver. However, when we get new people who don't understand that we don't make fun of people who are less fortunate than us, they often come in and make comments like, those people are just lazy slobs. It has nothing to do with depression. Or if those people would just get off of their ass and clean, then they wouldn't have to worry about XYZ. I just automatically ban people for that. And the reason is I don't feel like I have the time or the mental capacity to teach full-grown adults things that they should be teaching their own 9-year-old, which is just basic empathy. If a cleaning channel makes you mad, you need a hobby. So I don't really ban for a lot. In fact, I try not to ban anybody at all because I understand that people are people, but I just won't allow the channel to be a landing zone for people who just want to bash on other people. So for instance, one of the things I hear a lot is I'll explain the depression cycle, which is basically you start to get depressed, and that's not just a feeling of sadness. Depression is you lose a lot of energy, your sleep cycle changes, your motivation evaporates. So you can have depression without ever feeling sad. So maybe the house starts to go a little haywire. Since the motivation is not there, they don't get up and pick up after themselves, and then they'll set, say, like a cup or something on the nightstand, and then they'll never bring it to the kitchen. Well, the additional clutter makes additional depression. The house starts to feel overwhelming, so the cycle feeds on itself. They don't clean because they're depressed, but then the clutter feels overwhelming, which makes them more depressed, which makes the clutter get bigger, and it's a vicious cycle to break. Still, I get people who will come in and say things like, well, that's no excuse. I worked 700 hours a week and raised 16 children, and I still was able to get off of my ass and clean my house. That's childlike thinking. It's ignoring the fact that you were in a different financial situation, you were raised by different style of parents, your environment was different, your peers were different. You physically have different brain chemistry than the people you're talking about. You can't transplant your past onto another person's present. It doesn't work that way. People are different. I work roughly 100 hours per week between these cleanups and the videos and social media and maintaining my own house. I would never ask my son to do that because he's a different person. He has a different threshold for pain and for work. He has a different mental state than me. So when people come in and say things like that on the channel, I actually tell the people I help, don't read the comments, because the people who say things like that are emotionally lazy. They are intellectual slobs. They think like children, and I just need a little bit of time to boot them out of the adult room. But before I can do that, you're going to see a few people who just haven't matured to that level in life yet, or even to the point where they realize that they're on a cleaning channel and complaining because we're cleaning. People are weird. Once we finish all the sanding and vacuuming, we're going to go over the entire room with Kills 2 primer. And the reason I'm doing this is because there's an old paint job on these walls, doors, and windows that I believe is oil-based. But even if it's not, it's been so long since this has been painted. Some of the paint is flaking off, and the paint that they used last time is slick. It's got kind of a gloss feel to it. That makes it hard for regular latex paint to stick, but if we put a layer, just even a single coat of Kills primer on it, that acts as a bonding agent. And that not only helps the paint to stick, but it helps it to stick more smoothly than it would if we just put regular paint right onto the wall. Now, we did not paint the ceiling in here. This is the only room where we didn't paint the ceiling, and that was just an issue of time. This is the last day that we could be at this house before we have to move on and do our own stuff. However, we did leave them, I think it was 1.5 gallons of white, which is what we're using on these walls, 1.5 gallons of gray, which you saw in other videos, and then 1.5 gallons of primer and 1.5 gallons of ceiling paint, so they can do all this themselves and still have enough left over to do their main bedroom. We also left them brushes, rollers, paint pans, and a tarp. I believe they're going to do that themselves. They do have the motivation to do it. The husband works a lot, so he's not around a lot, but the wife nonstop cleans in here. And when she saw how the other rooms came out, she's definitely motivated to do her bedroom. And with that much paint left over, they still have enough to like paint their neighbors' dogs. Like they wouldn't even have to charge the neighbors for that. They'd be like, hey, we painted your dogs. You're welcome. You don't owe us a dime. And then the dogs would be like, thank you for painting my dog fur. I feel pretty now. Hee. I think that's how dogs sound. They go hee hee. Anyway, on top of the Marvel posters that we bought, I say posters, but they were like canvas prints, and then some of them were those 3D type of pictures where as you move around the room, the picture changes. We also bought them a Spider-Man bed set that's got like a bedspread / comforter and then some pillowcases. And they already had a set of Spider-Man curtains, and we couldn't find another set because there's 2 windows. So they had one set to cover one window. Since we couldn't find Spider-Man curtains for the other one, we bought a combination of blue and red blackout curtains, and then we put blue on the outsides and red on the center so it mimics Spider-Man's costume. The reason I'm saying this now is because we didn't get footage of us making the bed, but I got after pictures of the bed. So you'll see that at the end of the video. And seriously, the transformation on this room was night and day difference once we got it all decorated. You'll see. So be patient, man. Be patient, man. As I'm doing the trim work on things like the windows and the baseboards, it's going to look like I'm painting over dirt or mold. It's actually not. It's just old wood. I mean, the last time this room was painted could have easily been from the 1950s. So there's a little bit of water damage on the wood and just old built up stains that you can't get out. So Kills is one of the things that helps cover that up. But yeah, before we started painting, I had Jason go around with Mr. Clean and wipe down all the baseboards and the walls, because even with the primer that we're using, the walls do need to be cleaned before we can start applying it. Otherwise, it's just not going to stick. After I was done with the trim work, then I had Jason come behind me with a roller and roll on primer. A lot of this day was spent just waiting. The actual paint job didn't take all that long, but we had to wait for it to at least dry to the touch before we could go to the next step. So it was basically slap that stuff on and then just sit in the kitchen and scroll through TikTok until it was dry enough to touch. The most common question I've gotten on these videos where I'm painting is, how can you paint without a tarp being on the floor? I rustling paint everywhere every time I roll. The key to that is don't smash the roller against the wall because it acts like a sponge. If you fill up a sponge with water and then you squeeze it really hard, all the water shoots out of it. That's the same thing with these rollers. So you don't use a ton of pressure and you roll slowly. Now you can put a tarp on the floor and just go speed demon on the whole place and it would be fine. You'll just be flinging paint on the ceiling and on yourself. So I've found over the years that if you just don't use a ton of pressure, go slowly, there's not even need for a tarp because you're not spinning the roller fast enough to fling paint. Also, don't punch the roller. When you punch a roller, it'll fling paint off just from the power of your knuckles. So that's one thing you don't want to do. I just assume that's the way most people paint, but I've learned to not do that. It seems like it would help, but it really doesn't. Also, if you do accidentally fling paint, I found it helps to curse at the roller and blame it for the problem. If you do that loud enough, then it feels shame and it stops doing it. I learned that from everyone's dad.
We're rolling now.
By the way, I mentioned being mentioned by a larger channel, but then I got off on the tangent of having to ban people and blah, blah, blah. Someone told me I was mentioned by Clutterbug, and for the life of me, I cannot figure out which video she mentioned me in. It's a large channel, and I've watched her stuff before. I think it's a great channel, but for whatever reason, I just cannot find a video where she's mentioned me at all, but I'm assuming that's where the influx of people came from. If anybody happens to know where I was mentioned, could you let me know what video that is in the comments? I'd really like to thank her for the mention, and I do read all my comments. And while I'm talking about things that aren't really related to this video, we went ahead and started up our Facebook page about a month or two ago because we had so many Facebook pages that were stealing our content and making money off of it that we finally just decided to go ahead and make our Facebook page the real one. So that's linked in the description of this video as well as in the About section of my main page. So if you'd like to go follow that on Facebook, that would be awesome. We're slowly building up our numbers over there. And the main thing is I just don't want people following fake pages. I work really, really hard for the videos that we make, and I'm just not a big fan of somebody copying and pasting our material and pretending that they're us. At least put some work into it. Anyway, that exists if you'd like to go follow that. Also, if you're a fan of the channel and you'd like an extra video every Wednesday, sometimes I post them on Tuesdays, but normally every Wednesday. The second tier of our memberships here on YouTube gets an extra video every week. The bottom tier is just for people who want to throw a couple bucks at us per month to help support the channel. And as always, when I bring this up, if you can't afford something like that, please, for the love of God, don't do it. It's just an extra thing for people who want to help support beyond just subscribing to the channel. But the number one thing you can do to help us out is just subscribe. No money, no donations. Just hitting the subscribe button helps way, way more than just about anything else you can do for the channel. Now, if you want to make it feel even more important, what you could do is subscribe to the channel and then unsubscribe from every other channel you follow. That way it makes your subscribe like way more valuable. Because look, I'm not just content with getting your adoration. We need to actively punish every other channel because they're not us. It's like, look, dude, you don't want to be Midwest Magic Cleaning? Then you do not not deserve a subscription. And then they'll cry, and that's when you know you've done your job. You won, and winning is all that matters. Suck it, other channels. Once the primer has dried, we're going to retrim the whole room in eggshell white. There's a name to this white, but I forget what it's called. It's like something cloud. It's white. But we're going to retrim the whole room in that and then roll that. And when you're painting a room white, you're going to interrupt that kind of monolith feel to it by adding color with curtains, decorations, your bedspread, the pictures that you put on the wall. My rule of thumb, just the way I personally like my decorations and my color scheme, is that if I'm going to have a bunch of stuff on the wall that adds color to a room, then I typically won't use a lot of color on the wall paint. So in this room, we're going to have a lot of blue and red and black because of the Spider-Man stuff. So it's safe to paint the walls white, and then the color and the vibrance comes from the decorations rather than the walls. If I've got a room where I don't have a ton of stuff to hang on the walls, then the wall becomes the decoration, and that's where I'll use brighter colors. That's not a rule. It's not a fad. It's not even a suggestion that I'm making to you. That's just the rule of thumb that I use for myself. My philosophy on decoration is if it's your house and you're doing it the way that makes you happy, it's perfect. If you like 1980s paneling, then put up 1980s paneling. Who cares what HGTV thinks? Who cares what your parents think? If you have a landlord, you kind of have to care about what they think because it's their house. But if you live there, you need to have your taste so that you're not living with someone else's. So for instance, I'm not a big fan of grays and beige, but I am a big fan of somebody who puts that on their walls because it makes them happy. That to me is more important than any decorative style or any fluctuation of taste that anyone could have. That being said, if you paint your living room brown, then you are a human turd. A turd of a human you are. I'm not putting up with turd walls. I'm not putting up with it. You say it makes you happy, then you need to change what makes you happy. Also, I feel like it's important to let you know that if you're new to the channel, this is not normally a thing that we do. We're a cleaning channel first and foremost, but this house just happened to be clean, so we didn't have to do much cleaning at all. This just needed a whole bunch of painting and fixing. Normally, the people that we help out have hoarding disorder, or they have severe ADHD. So if you're here for the first time, or even if you've been a long time member and you're wondering, did we change the format of the channel? No, we didn't. Going forward, we're just adding some fixes and some painting and stuff to what we normally do, but our main focus is still cleaning. So we may be going into a house that has hoarding disorder, and let's say we go into their bathroom and the bathroom is destroyed from the hoard. We're going to clean that up like normal, but then if we notice that the sink is leaky, I know how to fix leaky sinks, so we're just going to fix it on camera. If we notice that their toilet has a bad wax ring, I know how to put those in, so we're just going to replace that and fix small things as we go. We're not going to be doing home renovations. We're not going to try to be HGTV. We're just going to be cleaning some severe extreme cleanups, and then if it's within our capacity to fix things and make them look like new again, we're going to do that. So just take the things we've done in the past with our really extreme cleanups and add in an extra step of making things functional again. And that's the direction we're going with the YouTube channel. Not only do I think that's a thing that can make us more unique than the average YouTube channel or the average cleaning channel, but I think that if we have the ability to do those things and then we don't, I feel like it's a wasted opportunity for both us and the person we're helping. I would just feel better walking out of a place knowing that it's not just clean, but they can use their kitchen sink for the first time in 5 years, or they can take a hot shower finally, or that their living room no longer has a herd of moose just tromping around and being moose because we were able to de-moose the living room. We'd clean them first, so they would be clean, fresh moose set back out into the wild, frolicking through the forest and thanking us for cleaning them and setting them back into their own environment. Thank you for cleaning off my moose fur. Shut up, stupid moose. You're rude. We're getting down to the end of the video because Jason's now rolling on the final layer of paint. We actually only had to use one coat of paint in this room, so that's kind of the upside to using Kills primer and then white paint. You can do 2 coats and it would look better, but if you're using Kills primer, that's automatically white, and then you're using a nice thick high quality white paint, it's basically like using 2 coats of white because it's white on white. And then once he was done rolling all this, then we just put up the new curtains, slid the bed back into place, put the TV and the dresser dead center in the room. There's a little toddler bed that we put on the opposite side of the big bed so that it's hidden from view whenever you first walk into the room. It just makes it look more open and spacious if you can't see that bed. But I'll show a picture of that at the end too. Then we hung up all the artwork, then gathered up our stuff, and after 5 weeks of work, we're finally done with this house. I'm glad to finally be done with it, but not because I didn't like the work. It was the drive. We drove 35 miles there every day and 35 miles back. So every day that we worked on this house, we were driving 70 miles. I will not miss that drive at all. And then as soon as we were done with this one, we already have another house that we're going to be working on that was the aftermath of hoarding. A woman had divorced her husband in a very toxic relationship. He left and left his entire hoard in the house. So we're going to help her, and she's local. And then this whole week, Jason and I have spent basically de-hoarding my garage. We'll get into that on next video, but that's what you can expect next. We're doing a massive clean out of my garage, my pantries, my closets, a bunch of drawers, and we filled a 30-yard dumpster completely to the top with just random junk. That was a massive cleanup, and the transformation on that's pretty crazy too. Anyway, you can expect that next week. Thanks for watching. Members, I will see you this Wednesday. Everybody else, we'll see you next weekend. Later.